Hello everyone. So welcome to Conf42 and today we will talk about the accessibility in Android and we will see how we can implement it and how we can test. But before deep dive into the concepts and the slides, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Nav. I'm from Montreal. I'm software engineer at Manulife, also GDG organizer at GDG Montreal and Google developer expert for Android. And also I write medium articles. You can find me on different social channels via my handle, which is now crazy dev. So stay in touch there, and if you have any questions you can just ask me on any of the social channels like Twitter or LinkedIn, wherever you feel comfortable. So let's get started with the today's topic. So the first thing is, what is accessibility and how why it's important. So when we talk about the accessibility, it's not just about the people those who have a disability. It's actually extending your reach of your applications, how a user can interact with your applications, like providing more than one source, more than one options to the end user. Like there is not just a one single source that user can use to use your application. For example, just a touch. So in general terms, we can say that accessibility is to making sure that everyone who is having any kind of disabilities, like maybe having a color blindness or they have any other physical impairments, to make sure that they can also access applications. We consider this topic as we talk about this, and we will see how we can make our applications accessible for those people who have these kind of problems or situations. So we will see now the impact of accessibility. So the first thing is, it as I earlier told you, like it's not just about supporting the people those who have disability. It also helps to increase your application's reach. So according to the World Bank, it's like 15% of the world population, they have some sort of disabilities. So imagine, like if you provide a support like for for accessibility in your applications, like your user interfaces are accessible, then you will also cover that huge user base, which is you might didn't consider before. The second thing is the app's versatility. So it's basically providing more ways how a user can interact with your application. And as I earlier told, it's not just about disabilities, it's also for the it also covers the versatility part of your application. So now we will see how Android enables accessibility. So we know the generally like what's the definition of accessibility and why it's important. And if we enable the accessibility in our applications, it also helps the people those who don't actually have any kind of disability issues. So one of the main ways how Android enables accessibility is by allowing users to hear the spoken feedback. So whatever is, like for example, if you open any application, so whatever the content is on the screen, with the help of the tools like talkback or speech recognition, screen readers, Android will speak for you, like whatever the content is currently visible on the screen. There are other ways, but that was the major way, like the spoken feedback, and mostly used so far, as far as I have seen that, and I have also tested with those tools, and they are worked pretty well. So now we will see like how we can make our applications more accessible and to make sure that there is no any issues with their user interfaces. The first thing is the task flows. So this is not the basically the designing of your user interface. It's basically the it's the process of completing one particular task in your application. For example, forget password or reset password, and we need to define the very like well defined clear task flows so that user can easily able to find those steps and easily able to navigate using those steps. For example, if they want to reset their password, it might be directly visible under the menu, but if it's under like like 5 steps under the hood. Like you first go to the drawer, then you select some options like settings, then you go to the profile, then you go to those kind of options. Like there are 5-6 steps, then user might feel not comfortable using your application, and they might just leave your application and also give you a bad rating on App Store. So whenever you define, like, figure out the tasks, important tasks in your application, and then make sure that you have the minimal navigation steps so that user can easily perform those tasks without wasting too much time. The second is the action target size. So more sometimes you might see like the applications, they have a fancy designs, and but the issue is with those fancy designs that they didn't cover the clickable size, like the touch target size of those particular things. Like if you designed any custom view and you set its, let's say, width or height to 2020 dp, that means like it looks like very little icon on your application, and when user tries to perform click on that, it will be really hard or challenging for the end user. So the thing is like how big. So if you know that the material design team, they provided the guidelines for Android design, not just for Android UI designing, UI development, but also for iOS. So the minimum touch target size should be like 48 dips. So whenever you design your custom views or any other views, try to make sure that if there is a clickable action, you need to make sure that they are like having the minimum touch target size. Most of the elements, for example, image buttons or buttons, they already have that minimum touch target size defined, so you don't need to worry about in that case if you're using the material components in your application. But if you are as I told you, like if you are developing something custom, make sure that those views or those components on the interface are accessible by the end user. Next one is the labeling of interface controls. Sometimes we design, like sometimes we have components in our application or in our user interface which is like just for decorative purposes, like for images, and sometimes we are also using images for providing some sort of information or using images for performing some actions. So in that case, try to make sure that you add the labels to those images so that when user using the tools like talkback or screen readers, they will understand like what actually that particular component means or what actually action that particular component is associated to. So that is the labeling for your interfaces. I will cover in the later part how we can add labels to the UI components. And the fourth one is the enabling the focus based navigation. So if you if your user, they try, like they are using tools or like input sources like d-pads or trackballs or keyboards, then make sure that you also provide the support for the focus based navigation. That means like if they are using arrows like move up, left, down, right, so try to define your navigation. By default, how XML layout is like processed by the readers or the um screen readers of the talkback is like the order of how you have defined the elements in your XML. So if you have 4 elements, they will be ordered like 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you go to that using that bottom, like that down direction, so it will be like going from 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you have some sort of custom navigation, then you need to make sure that it will be properly followed, properly defined in your XML, so that when user tries to use these kind of tools like keyboards or d-pads, the navigation is working as expected. So those were the basic parts of the navigation or accessibility, or what are the important concepts that we need to be taken care of when we try to when we are developing our UIs in Android. And now we will see some little implementation, like some properties that you can add to your XML components. For example, to image view for your minimum size, those kind of properties. We will see how we can add those properties to our XML components to make sure that our application is accessible for everyone. So the first thing is the image button here, but as I told you before, like the material components, they by default have the minimum touch target size defined for all the components that are clickable. For example, here is the image button, and In this example, I have added the third line. If you see, it's Android content description. That is for the label. So if you miss the content description for your decor, if you are using the images only for decorative purposes, you can omit this, and you can add the property called important for accessibility and just set it to no. But if your image is for some sort of action, then you must add a content description, and that you can refer to the string resources. And and here it's the image button, but it would be the content description make more sense when you are using the image views. And now the next example is the text view, and here I have added the two properties. First one is the flexible. So flexible means like if when the user is using any tools like screen readers, this component should be processed or not by that tool. So setting it to flexible false, that means the talkback or screen reader will skip this. And the next property is the screen reader focusable, and it's only available since Android version P. So that's why I added the last line, which is says tools target API P, just to ignore the warnings in your XML designs when you're developing your application. And on the next example is the heading. So sometimes if you see in the web navigation, like in the websites, like we have the headings, then paragraphs, headings, and paragraphs associated to those headings. So if you have some sort of designs in your application, like sometimes we have terms and conditions that have, like, we have heading, and then we have a long paragraphs underneath that, and then we have again like some sort of headings. So if you want to process if you want to support heading based navigation, so user can move easily between those components, you can add the property called accessibility heading, and it's only available since Android version P. So here is the sample of the focus based navigation. So there are a couple of properties that you can add to your components. As I told you, like by default, tools, they process your components as they ordered in the XML. So if you see here, it's there for, so it will be go from text view, hello world 2, hello world 3, and then the image. But if you want to do something custom, you can add two properties called like next focus forward, next focus left, right. I will show you later in the Android Studio how like what are the other options available, but here I only added the next focus forward. So from the first text view, like TV hello world, it will go to the third text view, and then it go back to the second text view, and from there it will go to the image view. And if you see in the last image view tag, I added the content description and set it to a null. This is also other option if you don't want to set important for accessibility to no in your image views, and what it tells to the tools or to the accessibility related tools like talkback, that this image is only for decorative purpose, so it will not be processed by the accessibility tool, like those tools. On the right hand side, I have the example for labeling your components. So this is a very old example, I can say, because if you are familiar with the material design, they have new components like text input layout, where you can add labels to that component, and that will be behaving as a label for those. But if you want to if you are still having some old code bases where you have added text in your layout files, you can attach the labels to those added text using the text views and set the property label for your text view. So in this case, if you see, I have username entry, and then I set the label for that edit text using the username label text view, and then just defining the ID of my edit text. The next example is for accessibility live region, and it's very important one, I can say. So sometimes if you're familiar, let's say for the login flow, when login fails, we show random message, right? Like a message which says like login failed, or you have entered wrong credentials, whatever. So in that case, that error message is not always visible on screen, right? It's like a conditional. So if that condition is true, then we show that message. So here, using that accessibility live legend property, what we are telling to the tool, like talkback, that how that tool gonna process that particular view, in this case which is text view. And there are three property, like three ways. It is assertive, none, or polite. Assertive means like if at particular given time, this when this particular view is shown, comes or shows up on the screen, talkback will stop whatever it's processing, and it will process this tool, this particular view immediately. And none is the default behavior, and the polite one is like whatever is the tool processing now, just finish that, and then like after that that will uh, process this particular component. And the next example is about the grouping of layout components. So sometimes if you see, like in, like for example, we have a list of items. For example, let's say we have a list of contacts, and in each item we have a person's name, last name. There might be a date of birth, or maybe their sex or gender, whatever. Like different properties are there, and we don't want to process all those items like one by one by accessibility tools or the screen reader tools. So in that case, we can group them together using the property called screen reader forkable, or adding the forkable to the parent tag of those components. So in this case, I have relative layout that I would not recommend you guys to use. So it might, in your case, it might be constraint layout, or it might be linear layout, and or if you are using contours, then it might be something else. So you can add the forkable tag to the parent. So in this case, I have added to the relative layout. So what it it basically informs the tool, or informs to the accessibility related tools, that all the components of this particular tag, like this particular root view, will be processed as of one group. So if you have 10 components, in this case, in this example, I have two text views, so those two will be processed together, and they will be treated as a one component. And it's very easy, very helpful when we have list items, so that user can easily understand like what that full item is means, rather than like going one by one, like first name, last name, and let's say if there are 5 components, it will be not a good experience for the end user. So those are the some of the properties that you can add to your XML layouts. So now we will see how we can test our accessibility of our application. Like is there a automation available? Like is there a, like we have Espresso for UI testing and Agent for unit testing. Is there tools or ways for doing that? And then we will see what are the manual tool or the analysis tools that we can use to make sure that our application is accessible for everyone. Manual testing is like interacting with your application using the accessibility services. So for example, you have developers just finish their one task, and they hand it over to the testers. Or if you are a developer and you are going to test all these things, then you might just turn on the talkback and then process screen by screen of your application and see if there is any issues, so which is like a manual testing of your application. And then the testing with the analysis tools, there are various tools. Again, talkback is kind of a manual and analysis, like that you can do more like a manual thing. But there is a very very good tool which is called accessibility scanner, and it's freely available in Play Store, that you can install it to your device, and then from there you can scan the issues if your layouts having any issues, like if there is any color contrast issues, or if there is any touch target size issues, or if there is any issues related to the accessibility, you will be able to catch those using that tool. I will show you the sample later on after the slides. And then yes, there is a way for adding the Espresso, like the accessibility tests in your UI tests. So if you have UI tests, there is only a single line of code that you need to add, and then is one dependency that you need to add to your build file, and you will be good to go, and your whole test will be like integrated with the accessibility test or checks. And if there is any issues, your test will fail, and you can easily figure out there also like how you can test your application's accessibility. And then there is a user testing, like just hand over your application to real people and then see how they interact with your application, and if they found any issues you can work on those issues before publishing your application. The last one is the pre-launch report. It's very important and it's also freely available. Before we publish our application, there is a pre-launch report which contains a lot of information about the application, and then there is a portion which is related to the accessibility issues that you can find, which is also early stage, or it can be like a last step, I guess, before you launching your application. So you can stop there and see if there are any important issues or showstoppers that you need to fix before actually release your application. So here is the code sample of adding the accessibility checks to your Espresso test. So if this code is written in Kotlin way, so in the left side, I would prefer to use this one because this is the more concise one, and on the left side, on the right side, on the left side one is the more concise. In the right side, I have added, this is also enabling the accessibility checks, but there is also additional properties that you can add on to that accessibility checks. So when you say enable the checks and set run checks from root view set to true, that means it will process the full UI. So if you have only single test, let's say in your UI test, like you just testing one label in your application and you are not testing the full UI, in that case it's really helpful that if there is any issues, let's say you have 10 components, if there is any issues related to the accessibility found in those components, your test will fail and you will be able to see in the logs like what went wrong. And then there is also other properties that you can set on top of accessibility checks. Like if you want to express some kind of results, like you don't want to fail your test, or you don't care about some views in your application or some properties. So if you see in the right side, I added a set expressing result matches, and I set that if there is any text contrast issue, like if there is a color contrast issue just associated to that particular given ID, which is like text to be changed, it can be any ID of your component, just ignore that and just continue with the test. So these are the basics, like how you can implement accessibility for the XML and how you can add the tests using the Espresso. Now I will show you some demo, like the real code, and how we can use the tools that I show you earlier or explained you earlier in the slides. So now if you see my screen, I have Android Studio opened and I have a real device mirror to my MacBook, which is Pixel. So let's first open if you see on the screen here, it's accessibility scanner. If you open this application, and you will see like if there are any issues that are earlier found, if you see the history is there, then there is a settings button that you can see the thresholds about, and it's all about basically application, and you can find this application on Play Store. So once that application is installed, so you will see this blue check, like the tick on your mobile screen. So if you want to test any application, for example, I have this sample created for this talk. So I have these 4 or 5 components. So these two are I have used the old XML components, like this is the image and this is the text view, and then these are the compose components, like the text, whatever different components in the code base I will show you later. So if you want to test using the accessibility scanner, you just click on this. You will see 2 options, like record, you want to record this process, or you want to take a snapshot. So I will go with snapshot. Now if you see, it gives me it highlights there are 3 issues with the 3 components. So you can see there are a couple of options, like if you want to share this report with your, let's say if you are a tester, or if you want to share this with your team lead or other team members, you can also share this report. Or if you want to go through these components, like what are the issues, if you see here, there is a details, like if there is a color contrast issue, there is a color contrast issue for this component, and if you click it will take you there. So this component is having this issue, and if you see, if you want to read, it says like contrast ratio, current ratio is this one, foreground color is this one, background color is this one, suggested is this one. So this is the standard provided by the material design guidelines for accessibility for the color contrast ratios for your text color and the background color of your text. So this is how you can use the accessibility scanner tool in your applications. And same for let me find talkback. Also it's in under the accessibility. If you see the screen readers, accessibility scanner, so there is a talkback under the accessibility menu, and you can turn it on and just go through your application and see if there are any issues. So these are how you can use these tools, and they are freely available. The talkback is default shipped with your most of the Android phones operating system, and then the scanner you can install. So let's see the test that I have written for my code. So first I will show you the code. So if you see the code, I think it's visible. Let me make it a little bit larger so you can easily see this. So this is my main activity, and there are some experimental APIs that I'm using. So if you see here, I have used the compose, and then I have compose code here. I will not cover the compose accessibility, but I have added, and you can see here like how you can add the accessibility to your compose components, like using the content description for your icon and using the semantics for and then there are different like properties that you can add to the components. Like if you want to set the focus target, if you want to customize the navigation in compose, there is a property like a focus order, and then you can define that, and then you need to define the focus requesters so that you can attach these to your composable functions or composable components. So if you want to go to second, then you just say like when this dot down, like from this image, when the user press the downwards arrow, go to the second focus requester, and it will go to that second, which is where you have attached this one. So in this case I have attached this to this text, so it will go to this text. So these are the couple of things that how you can add accessibility. This code is already posted on GitHub. You can check and see the how you can do the accessibility in compose. So for example, live region, like how you added before in XML, now you can, there is a semantics, and then it will have these properties like heading. If you want to process want this text to be processed as a heading, you can add this heading. If you want to set the live region, you can set that. Again, focus order and content description for the other components. So this is in the compose. This is just the some properties, and now I will show you the activity main, which is XML way of doing things. So I have this image view, and if you see there, it's highlighted, and if you see here, what it says is like set content description. So you will get the length warning about this, like you need to set the content description for this. So I have already added just for you to showcase how it looks like without that. So if I add the content description, that error or that warning goes away. So other cool thing is about the latest Android Studios, I think since 4.0, or I'm not sure about exact version, you will get the warnings in your during the development phase, like if there is any issues. Like for example, if you see before, I told you like the scanner shows the excessive color contrast issue for this. So if you see here, it says we have like two warnings and one error. And one error shows that the source is like this text view. It has a color contrast issue. So either you can fix this or you can ignore this. So if you want to fix this, it change that, and if you see that error goes away. So this is some of the cool features that are integrated within the develop IDE, so that you can support the accessibility within your application during the early phases of your application development, when you are actually playing with the XML code. Next is the accessibility testing using Espresso. So I have Espresso test here. So what I did is like, it just enabled this. So I just set that run checks from root view to true, and this is from the Espresso's dependency that you need to add for accessibility checks. So this is from this library, and if I show you the build file here, here is the dependency for this one. So if Espresso accessibility, you just search it and you will find it there. And once you add the checks for true and set it to true, and if I run these tests, as you see, it starts running and we will see the results. Because we fixed that color contrast issue and we added the content description, so I think no test will fail. And so both the tests are failed, and I think there are still accessibility issues there. So if you see, the first test is fails, and you see there is a one accessibility issue. So it says that there is an Android compose view and it's not clickable. And if you see here, this item may not have a label readable by screen readers. So there is some views that still missing the content description or not clickable, and your test will fail. So this is how you can add like a one line of code which will helps you to find out the issues related to accessibility in your application. So this is the some basics of the how you can add the accessibility related properties in your XML files, like screen reader focusable, then next focus forward, and if you see other options, so there are a couple of other options like next focus down, focus left, focus right, focus up. So you can add those properties as per your requirements. So that's all for this talk, and I hope you learned something new. Feel free to contact me on different channels as I show you before, on whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter or Medium or GitHub, wherever you feel comfortable. And here are some of the references to the some of the resources that you can follow to learn more about accessibility in Android. So I will share the slides. So thanks for your time and have a great day. Thank you everyone. Bye.